Today, my guest is Jessie Ryan. Jessie is the president of the Sac City Unified School Board, also serves on the city's Measure U committee, where she's had a lot of impact as well. As we do every week, I'm going to do a very quick review of our council meeting yesterday, which was yesterday afternoon. And we'll get right to Jessie. There are lots and lots of questions that people have about the school board and what's going on with Sac City Unified. If you have comments or questions, you can always push them in and fill this out on your screen, and we will try to get to as many as we can. So, and I forgot to say good afternoon or good morning or good night, depending on when you're watching this. So what we did yesterday, 2 items of note, I think. First, we got a financial update on where we are as a city. Fortunately, I think because of a lot of things we have done over time, freezing hiring, freezing contracts, really looking at what is non-essential, we're still in pretty decent shape. As we've talked about before, we have spent now our full $89 million in CARES money. $9 million of that went into the city coffers for reimbursement on work that we've done. And then $80 million actually went out to the communities to support small business, to support individuals, to support the arts, lots of stuff. And if you want to go to our website at cityofsacramento.org, there are full lists of what we've done there. The homeless as well have received dollars. We also had an opportunity to extend our whole person care program, Pathways to Home. And so that we did yesterday as well. That gives us another few months of this. And we have served over 2,000 homeless individuals and individuals at risk of being homeless with full care. So that's something that we're doing as well. All right, Jessie, let's see if we can start off with a quick bio of yourself, just so people know, like, where'd you come from here and why are you doing this?
Thanks, Jay. Well, first, I guess I would share that I am a product of Sacramento area schools. So why am I doing this? It's, deeply personal for me. I very easily could have been a statistic. I grew up extremely poor, had a lot of housing instability. I actually went to 8 schools between kindergarten and high school by virtue of growing up with a single mother who was often on welfare and trying to do whatever she could to keep a roof over our head and food on the table for my brother and I. I was very lucky to have a mother that, despite the poverty, told me my path out of poverty was going to be through a higher education. And by some miracle, I found myself at the doors of a California community college where I had an incredible counselor, Lupe Gomez, Sacramento City College, take me under her wing and refuse to let me fail. And it was really because of that I believe I went on to get my bachelor's degree and then go into education policy. I actually started my career as a community organizer, working with migrant farm workers up and down the Central Valley, helping with everything from technology literacy to education equity issues. But it really was at the Campaign for College Opportunity where I found my passion for repairing broken systems by really looking at systems inequities, community college, CSU, and UC, and trying to figure out what are the policy levers and how are the coalitions really being engaged in such a way that they're disrupting inequities for public education. Really, flash forward a few years, I ended up becoming a mother. My husband and I ended up adopting 2 children, and Arsenio and I were blessed to grow a family overnight. From a period of 10 months, we went from the 2 of us to 2 children, a 4-year-old and a 6-month-old. And then I had the reality of trying to navigate a very complex education system as the parent of 2 children who often were discounted by virtue of their background and the color of their skin. And that really, for me, ignited a fire in my belly around K-12 reform. I had done a lot of higher ed work over the course of my career, but it was when I first saw my son at 2 years old, 2.5 years old, began to be told that he had behavior issues that were totally accepted in his white peers, that I really recognized that you couldn't just work on pathways into and through college. If you really wanted to dismantle a broken system and create educational equity for all, you had to go all the way down into preschool and work on every step of the way in K-12. And that kind of brings me to where I am today, both as a school board member and as a vice president at the Campaign for College Opportunity. I get to live my dream, which is working on repairing the pathway preschool all the way through college so that students can reach their full potential.
So tell me a little bit right now. I mean, we read a lot in the papers about what's going on in Sac City Unified. If I'm a parent, I'm a little bit confused about what's happening with my kids. So tell me kind of, if you can start a little bit before, what's the district's response to COVID been? I know that you did a lot in the way of getting people meals and things like that. Connectivity, all those things are important. And then where are we now as far as distance learning and what's happening to our kids in the city?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about that. Well, I think it's really fair to say that as a parent of now a 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, I don't think any of us could have imagined a year and a half ago that we would be facing a global pandemic and that we would be having to literally build a plane midair overnight, which is our educational system, trying to move our entire educational system, which had been brick and mortar, to online virtually overnight. I will tell you, in the beginning, when we first were hit with the pandemic and we were sheltering in place, we made the decision to really focus on meeting the basic needs of students and families. Because frankly, if you don't have your basic needs being met as a child, there is no way you're going to learn and thrive in an online setting. And so I spent a lot of time and energy as I was hearing from students and parents that they were fearful that when schools closed, that their access to food would be cut off. Because for so many of our low-income students and families, it is their school site where they get their daily breakfast, where they get their lunches, for some of them where they get their early suppers. And what we found is that food insecurity was huge, but also when we went into shelter in place, we had families who, needed access to basic necessities outside of food. And so we really looked at how can we have our school sites be this one-stop shop for both access to food and other critical necessities that our families need. I'm really proud to say that we were able to, through the efforts of a whole army of hero nutrition service workers, serve an incredible number of meals to students and families. And that's because we actually worked with Congresswoman Matsui to change our federal food requirements to allow us to provide shelf food to our students and families and multi-day distribution. And what that meant is at more than 40 sites, almost overnight, our staff moved our school nutrition services to our school sites to distribute almost 1 million meals in the beginning of that time, but we're now at more than 3 million meals that have been distributed to students and families across the district. In addition to that, we were looking at how do we partner with nonprofits so that they can provide additional support to students and families that were trying to grapple with so much trauma and uncertainty in these unprecedented times. And we had incredible nonprofits like City of Refuge step up, like the Sacramento Kindness Campaign step up in Oak Park, to do everything from offering additional meal support to being able to provide access to counseling services, to being able to direct people to safe spaces. Actually, as you know, City of Refuge was operating one of the only shelters that remained open through the pandemic and responding to families and mothers who needed an emergency place to stay. So that really kind of speaks to some of the basic needs. But then, everybody has been also talking about when you go from accessing your education in a classroom at a school site to moving online overnight, connectivity is a huge issue. I didn't get my first computer as a poor kid until I was in college. And then it was $100, used computer that I ended up buying. We actually have never been a one-to-one one device district in Sac City. So we actually had to almost overnight procure tens of thousands of Chromebooks. I'm really proud to say that we were able to get out 27,000 Chromebooks into the hands of our students throughout the district. And I also want to take the opportunity to say that, we started back in April with one Chromebook per household. As Chromebooks came in, we started going one-to-one for students. Now, every single student who needs a Chromebook should have it. If they don't, they should be contacting their principal. No student should have to share their device with a sibling. That should not be the case. We have bought enough Chromebooks so that everyone can have access to one. Connectivity and internet has been a huge issue too. When you're trying to take care of your basic needs, paying for the internet can be really hard. And so we were able to form a partnership, and I want to thank the city of Sacramento and Councilmember Schenirer and others for being a part of that, with Comcast to provide 6 months of free internet to low-income students and families throughout the district. That is continuing to go on. We've actually extended the initial sign-up phase until the end of December, and so families can participate in that. We also have hotspots available for families who are unable to connect through Comcast. And so if you need a hotspot, contact your principal. We can make that available to you too. We've been providing a lot of mental health supports and student supports, and I can talk about that a bit more later. But I think, really it's important to talk about the academics and the distance learning. So in the spring, it was very much crisis learning. We keep hearing this over and over again. When we had to pick up and move to remote learning overnight, there were huge education equity implications. Some students had access to really high quality learning, and others felt very disconnected for a variety of reasons. We ended up surveying thousands of parents. We had a lot of parent forums. We did a large town hall. I did my own listening session and then small group discussions, including with students, where we heard loud and clear that moving forward, any distance learning plan needed to have quality assurances for our families. They wanted to ensure that there were more live instruction opportunities so that there was more face-to-face time for students and teachers so that they were creating connections. We heard that they wanted to have more opportunities for supports rather than independent study. And what that means is students and families said that, if you're a working parent and you have multiple siblings, having students go off and complete assignments on their own or go and find links to worksheets online is not really effective. So students and families said, we want to be able to access in real time as we're doing our homework and additional work during the class day, that additional support and that live interaction. We also heard from a lot of working families that they wanted to have an opportunity to access recorded instruction, that they wanted to be able to go back, and this makes a lot of sense if you're a working parent. I know my husband and I'm fortunate to have a 2-parent household, but we're trying to navigate all of this on a daily basis, and being able to go back and access chunks of recorded instruction would be really helpful to me. I've heard from so many parents who've said, if I have a child with a learning disability, if I have a child who is an English language learner, being able to go back and reference some of that critical learning to reinforce it and support it when a parent or a family member is available is key to that academic success. And then finally, we heard a lot from families that they wanted to have a sense of what progress their kids were making. There's a lot of research that's coming out about pandemic learning and what inequities it produced for Black and Brown kids, but also for our special education students. A lot of our partners like Education Trust West are looking at the civil rights implications of distance learning. And one of the sad truths is that we're seeing a lot of learning loss that has happened from the spring school closures to the reopening and remote learning that we're doing this fall. So as you know, we began our school year last week with a couple shortened days. That was really a slow start that we came to an agreement agreement with our teachers on that allowed students to get to know their teachers over the course of a couple hours on 2 separate days. At the same time, our teachers were getting ready for the school year and doing some professional development so that they had the tools that they needed to be successful. Going into this week, we are still at a place where the district and our teachers union have not come to an agreement to distance learning plans moving forward. And that's very challenging, as you can imagine. But what I will say for our parents and families who want to know what to expect is that we have had an incredible cadre of teachers, of principals, of staff that are doing everything that they need to be present for their families, to be present for the students, and to ensure that there is quality learning happening each day, despite the fact that we don't have a formal learning plan in place. We're still working towards that end, but we at the school board level are very cognizant of the fact that we have some legal requirements around our students' learning. And I think, Jay, you might be aware, and for others, because of the challenges related to the spring, the legislature and the governor stepped in and they said, through SB 98, we are going to really create some guardrails and expectations around distance learning moving forward so that we don't end up looking back a year from now and saying that huge educational divides were created from which students couldn't recover. And so what that looks like is expectations around instructional minutes for each grade level, so elementary and secondary, expectations about interaction, engagement for our students and live instruction. And we are really committed to ensure that all of our students, no matter what school they go to in the district, not only have their legal minimums met, but are continuing to grow academically as they're having their social emotional needs met too.
Great. Well, let me back up for a second. I just want to add a couple of shout outs here if I can. Sacramento Food Bank and Family Services did and continues to do an amazing job in this community. People. Any of this would have worked without them. So to Blake Young, who's the executive director, and if Father Madigan is listening at all, to Father Madigan, thank you for all the help from the food bank. That's been great.
Can I just say on that? So the food bank was amazing in working with some of our community-based organizations to, at our highest needs sites, provide additional food boxes and provisions. And thank you and all of the folks involved in that, because it was a lifesaver for so many of our families.
Right. It allowed them to do dinners as well as lunches through that. Absolutely. So, and I know they've done millions of meals as well. I want to add my shout out to Comcast for helping on the connectivity part, because that wouldn't be working. And I don't think we can walk away at all from what you said. All of the teachers, all of the aides, all of the school personnel who've just been doing an amazing job. We're all learning every day. This is definitely hard on our young people, but I know it's hard on our teachers as well and our principals, because it's something we've never done before. And we're trying to get up and running. As you said, as the plane is running down the runway, we're trying to get the wheels on. Let me ask you a question. We have one that just came in. And I know one of the sticking points in the negotiations between the teachers union and the board,
It's okay.
Has been around privacy issues and recording lessons. And yes. So the question is, what are the privacy issues and other issues being raised by those who don't want to record classes?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we actually purchased Nearpod at the suggestion of many of our teachers in the district. So Nearpod is a software that really helps record our teachers and provide standalone lessons that aren't part of the traditional Zoom. So, to the response about privacy concerns, we absolutely hear privacy concerns about students that don't want to be on camera and recorded. And what I love about Nearpod is that our teachers can record chunks of lessons, and they can actually upload them and incorporate them both into the class day as part of the minimum instructional minutes required by law, and then also make them available after the class day, only recording the teacher, only seeing the teacher, only hearing the teacher's voice.
And I'm assuming that those recordings would be for the students and not used for any evaluation purposes.
No, yes, exactly. That's absolutely right. And I also think it's really important to note that, obviously there isn't an agreement on that yet, but, we've had several of our civil rights partners, so public advocates, Children Now, Ed Trust West, and we're seeing a lot of civil rights groups throughout the state weigh in on this issue that students who are having to navigate, these very difficult and uncharted territories, and their families need to be able to have multiple options outside of the regular school day to access their learning.
Great. Let's switch just a little bit, but it's very much related to mental health status of our young people. This has been so hard on them. I can't imagine a high schooler who's missed their graduation, and just young ones who, maybe were swiping their parents' iPads, but really, understanding what to do and how to do it has been hard on them. So tell me a little bit about what the district is doing. And I know we're doing some things in the city that we're partnering with you on out of our CARES money, but why don't you start with that?
So, I think that we can't underscore how challenging this is mentally for our children. We've seen a lot about the suicide rates skyrocketing. I know that our mental health issues, in particular for our middle and high school students, have significantly grown. But I think we also need to be talking about the fact that, this isolation is harmful and creating trauma for our lower grades as well. In my own family, and I won't share who it was, but one of my children started struggling with some depression because as someone who was medically vulnerable, we weren't able to have our kids play with their peers like they normally would. And you hear this all over the place. That isolation leads to disconnection. It leads to depression, and it leads to sometimes suicidal thoughts. We have had an amazing and heroic effort of community-based organizations, but also our student support center directors and our Connect Center to step in and provide mental health support and an olive branch to our kids who are struggling. For us, one of the most important things we could do on the front end was make sure that we were measuring engagement. And, Jay, the reason that mattered is when kids are crying out for help, quite often they're not literally crying out for help. They're not asking you to provide them with mental health support. They are just silently withering away. Right. And so first we put in place an engagement effort so that we were tracking down all of our disconnected youth. And that meant, in a district of 40,000 students, making sure that all of our students, including our homeless and foster students, were accounted for. I'm really proud to say that we went from having, 40,000 students that we had to make contact with to only, and it's still hard, being disconnected from about a little over 100 students. And what that looked like was, I'll use American Legion as a great example. American Legion, our continuation high school, had every one of their staff members, from their social worker to their principal to their teachers, calling families and connecting with families. I mean, I heard stories about going to apartment complexes to knock on the door, texting aunties and uncles until we were able to get in contact with the student. At that point, there was a check-in. How are you doing? Do you have your basic needs met? And talking through that, right? What does that look like? Because as you know, from Child Protective Services, we're not seeing, the level of unmasking of trauma and abuse that we did before. Our Student Support Center directors overnight created virtual counseling services and a virtually calming center that our families and our students can access at any time, school year and beyond. And so we're doing all of those things. And then, coming into this fall, we're also partnering with community-based organizations, not just to do continued counseling, but I'm hoping that we're going to fund peer mentorship and some peer-to-peer counseling that provides students with kids who reflect their experiences, who can help be buddies, right, if you will, in very isolating and difficult times.
Right. So I know that's difficult. I know the city's put in about 2.5 million in CARES dollars.
Yes.
The biggest statistic or data point to me was when we did surveys of young people, 65% did not know who to call if they had a problem. So one, it's just a communication and education effort. And those, when we asked who would you call, over 60% said, I want to call a peer. So that peer mentoring that we're doing, and I know we're working with you on it. We only have a
Jay, can we give the number for, because you said they wouldn't know who to call. So 916 support. 916 support is a hotline to provide mental health services for our youth.
Okay, let me ask one last hard question here, which we got that just came in. Given the state of the SCUSD budget and relations with the teachers union, which we know are strained, do you see any path to averting the state loan and takeover? So
I absolutely do. I absolutely do. I mean, I would be Pollyanna-ish if I thought that as one board member, I could simply change the trajectory of everything. I know that there are real challenges, but I think where we have agreement is state takeover would not be good for our children, would not be good for our families, would not be good for our community. And all of history shows us that in other districts where this has happened, it's taken a decade or longer to recover from. We see a mass exodus of the families who can leave, and the kids who remain have education inequities that grow. So what is the path? I mean, the path we know based on 5 independent audits and the recent state auditor finding is healthcare benefit savings. And we know that if we collectively pool all of our bargaining units, not just our one unit together, we can save $20 million annually. So we needed to do that yesterday, but we absolutely can do that in the months to come.
Okay, great. And we've put in the comments section 916 support, which is 787-7678. You can always call my office as well. So let's hope that the teachers union and the school board, the superintendent can get on the same page. Our kids deserve it, and nobody wins this way. We just need to get it together for our young people and show them the way. So very last question here, Jessie. It's kind of the fun one. If you we're on the city council, so if we changed, although I'm not going back to the school board, I don't know that, but if we could change places and you were on the city council today and you had 4 votes in your pocket, plus you is 5, you got to do one thing, what would it be?
So there are a million things that I would love to do. But so what I would say, I've been very lucky to get to serve on the Measure U committee, and I've been working in partnership with Deborah Odo Kent and my committee members on a participatory budgeting effort. I would love to see a significant portion of the budget allocated to participatory budgeting. So why does that matter? I think that probably more than any time in my lifetime, I'm seeing right now that our community feels very disenfranchised, that there is this sense that we have a voice, but we don't know if it's being heard. And we're not sure if our budget and our values are reflected in the decisions that are being made. And what's amazing about participatory budgeting, I mean, if you look at New York, an incredible example of that, they have allocated a good chunk of their budget to empower our people, our community, to determine how they want to spend those dollars. Everything from educational programs that support our schools, to community gardens, to efforts to help support small businesses and businesses owned by people of color. I mean, an incredible range of things, but it is the community saying we're going to exercise the power of our voice, the power of our vote, and we're going to see that reflected in the budget for our city, because that's the only way we're going to have a budget that truly reflects the needs of the community at large. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity to do that. I know that that's being discussed in multiple venues right now, but I think what happens with participatory budgeting is you restore faith in our voters. You actually encourage young people to vote because they see that their vote matters and can influence the budget process. And you also begin to build a city that you stay in, that you raise your family in, and then you see your grandchildren grow up in, because you've been invested in how it grows and how we ensure that no one's being left behind.
Great. Well, thanks very much. We wish you luck as you move forward. I believe that not sure who we'll be having next week on, but we will get back to everyone. And thank you for your time today. And everyone stay healthy and be good. Take good care.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.